the working title for today's talk is Joining the Dance of God. Joining the Dance of God. And I'm going to start out by focusing what gets in the way of just dancing with everything. Dancing with the everything that touches everything else. Okay, and we're going to have to deconstruct this this word God as we go along and evolve a different view if you're going to really dance with all this. So the first really helpful thing, a couple things from our Muslim brothers and sisters. There's an absolutely precious encounter in the Haditha, which is the Haditha is it's a bunch of like episodes in Muhammad's life that are not included in Quran, and but they're important. And this one to me was when it was earth shaking for me when I heard it. And for some of you, it'll just bring it back to mind because I've talked about it. Most of you probably heard this one, but let's bring it in. Little encounter between Allah, the divine, and Muhammad, the human being. And this little exchange goes like this. The divine says, Allah says, you know, Muhammad, between you and me, there are 70,000 veils. But between me and you, there are none. That's all you need to know about the spiritual journey if you're really serious about it. It's not about getting something. It's not about getting enlightened. It's about dropping what's between you and the divine. 70,000 veils, 7 million veils, you know, is a constantly, but that's the work. It's in a way, it's a process of subtraction. You know, we got too much between us and the divine. You know, imagine trying to dance with 70,000 veils in between you. You know, what happened to Merton on that street corner on St. Joseph's Day in 1959 was the last veil dropped for a second. Yeah, and he was as surprised as anybody else. Yeah, so you know, that's the beginning of it. So we're going to have to unveil this God a bit before you could dance with it. Yeah, between you and me are 70. I remember a young little 7th grade girl when we were talking about this quote. She said, when did Muhammad live? And I said, oh, about the middle of the 7th century. And she said, don't you think we have more than 70,000 veils between us and God now? And I sort of laughed and I said, well, no, I really never thought about it. 70,000 seems sort of immense to me. I said, what do you think? And she says, well, I feel like I got like about 7 million. So very interesting. So let's go to our second Muslim source. This is one of the great books. It's called I Heard God Laughing, and it's some initial renderings from the of poems by the great Sufi saint Hafez, 14th century. So about 700 years ago, this wisdom was loosed on the world. And this is going to help us out because one of the great veils, he's going to talk about one of the great veils. Probably you could call it a bunch of veils. He says, once a young woman asked me, how does it feel to be a man? And I replied, my dear, I'm not so sure. Then she said, well, aren't you a man? And this time I replied, I view gender as a beautiful animal that people often take for a walk on a leash and might enter in some odd contest to try to win strange prizes. Gotta laugh. I view gender as a beautiful animal that people often take for a walk on a leash and might enter in some odd contest to try to win strange prizes. My dear, a better question for Hafez would have been, how does it feel to be a heart? For all I know is love, and I find my heart infinite and everywhere. Dear Hafez, it says, my dear, a better question for Hafez would be, how does it feel to be a heart? That's the title of this poem. Hafez wrote thousands of poems. The Islamic mullahs burned 90% of them, but this one made it through. How does it feel to be a heart? For all I know is love. And I find my heart infinite and everywhere. So this is about one of the great veiling mechanisms for veiling God, and that is gender. And he says, gender is a strange animal that people take for walks on a leash to try to win strange prizes at contests. He said, so he's trying to deconstruct this thing. And he says, I'm not a, there's a better question than, well, how does it feel to be a man would be, how does it feel to be a heart? So that leads us into something we've talked about during this 3 years of heart to heart. I mean, that's the name of this community, and it's the name of what we do on Sunday, the sense of what does it mean to be heart to heart with the divine, the human heart and the divine heart, the human heart and the heart of God. What does it really mean to be heart to heart, to be unified with this? And he said, that's a better question. So what is this heart that he's talking about? Well, for most of you, you've sort of heard this a few times, but it's good to bring it up now. He's not talking about the physical heart, and he's not talking about the emotional heart, which we, not just talking about either of those. He's talking about something bigger. He's talking about what's called the Sacred Heart in Catholicism. It's called the Awakened Heart in Buddhism. Islam calls it the Qalb. This is that point of contact between a human being and between a human person and the transpersonal reality that's bigger than us, and it's called the heart. And so let's just review that a little bit. We have these three operating systems, and so we're talking about threes today. And so we have our childhood operating system. It's what we're born with. It's survival and security based, because we try to survive. And so we have three operating systems. That's the first one. And it's emotional and it's instinctual. And thank God for it, because we never would have made it through childhood in our families of origins. But it's sort of a tribal operating system. It's the first that we have, and we really have to figure out how to live with our tribe, our family. You might just be a single mother. It might be, for me, it was a mother, a grandmother, two sisters, and a father who was mostly not there. But when he was there, everybody freaked out. Everybody got a little bit tense. We all had he was sort of unpredictable and angry and could be dangerous, So it was sort of nice that he wasn't around on one level, but when he came back, everybody went in another mode, you see, okay? So whatever your tribe was, we learned how to deal with that. And it's kind of tribal consciousness, and then we go off to school, the rules change, and also physically our brain is developing. And so then we can actually become from a member of a tribe, you could become an individual. And that's the second operating system. It's called reason, connected with frontal lobes. We can think for ourselves. We don't have to vote the way our parents voted. We don't have to see the world the way our parents. We can evolve our own individual view. Okay, that's evolution. And that's the second operating system of the mind, rational mind. It's a great upgrade. Doesn't mean we still don't have emotions and instincts, but you know, we can think, we can create science, we can figure out things to make life better. That's great. We still have the emotions and the instinct. Notice that politics in America now is still on that first level. It was started by guys who are on that second level. Guys say, "We can think for ourselves. We can figure this out. We don't need a monarch. We don't need the king of the tribe here. We don't need our tribal leader." So those original guys, they had a lot of blind spots, but they had developed this mind operating system. Jefferson, amazing guy. Had slaves, had some blind spots, but still, reason is what was motivating the beginning of this country. But notice how politics is now mostly tribal, and that's a retrograde. That's a devolution, you see, and the evolution does not go as a straight line. It goes, and then it's what they call retrograde motion. It goes back, and then it goes, and it goes back. It is heading towards the third operating system, which is called the operating system of the heart. It's the transpersonal operating system. It's the operating system that can connect you with everything. And that's the basis of the heart. The heart sees the world as connection. So that's what Hafez is talking about, okay? Just to get that straight. He says, what's it like to be a heart? Well, very few people know that. Very few people even know what it's, few people really know what it means to be an individual, to think for yourself. Merton wrote a lot about it. He called the tribal man, the mass man, the MASS, just the one that's in, can only think what it's told to think by its, not just its family, but then you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're whatever. You're in a tribe, and the tribe thinks for you. Yeah, and unfortunately, politics, we're in a retrograde now from democracy, and we're almost back to tribal things, guys screaming at one another. Whatever the big guy says, that's what I think, you see. So that's all over the world. So the evolution we're talking about, it always has this retrograde movement, and we're in one in this culture, whether you understand that or not, you feel it, gender, my God, go to Florida. Florida's the epicenter of turn it back. We don't say gay, and we don't talk about race. I mean, good thing DeSantis became the governor of Florida. If he tried to become the governor of Kentucky, he would have had to deal with our state song. The sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. 'Tis summer, and the darkies are gay. Now, he would have liked half of that. But you don't say gay down there. We don't talk about gender. Gender is, it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. And we don't have any of this, this fluidity. Pronouns, no, forget it. It's just Adam and Eve. We don't say gay. So he would have had problems with the end. He might have changed it to, the darkies are slaves or something like that. And now Florida is the place where woke came to die. And so what was woke in Kentucky is at one point we said, well, let's change that line, darkies, come on. And so we changed it to the old folks are gay. Well, that would still be hard for Ron to deal with. We just don't deal with it, So anyway, so this gender thing, we got to work with this gender thing because, we're living in 12,000 year span of patriarchy. Men are the boss. And that's a very small time of our human time on Earth, because it goes back hundreds, thousands of years where that didn't exist. But it's where we're living now. But it is starting to break down. And that's why, we're getting this backlash of, don't say gay. Pronouns. It is a little bit confusing at first, when my a more woke young son and his wife. He talked about C's going to the grocery store. He would say they went to the grocery store, and I'm thinking, how many wives do you have? You know, what's going on? You know, this whole pronoun thing. Well, we can maybe unpack that a little bit. We can unpack that a little bit. I got a poem that I've been working on. Let me pull it up, because we have to start. You know, at first it's a bit weird and uncomfortable, especially for people my age, your age probably. But we have to look into it. So this poem sort of leads us into that. So I mean, this whole gender thing and race and all that, we're not talking about it. Well, that's nonsense. This one goes like this. Jesus was a poet. And poets know that the only way you can speak about the unspeakable is via metaphor. When Jesus boldly proclaimed that I and the Father are one, from the get-go, most everybody misunderstood. The man we call Jesus was actually called Yeshua by his mother, relatives, and well, everybody else. Yeshua. Why? Because they all spoke Aramaic. The name Jesus was Greek for the Aramaic Yeshua. Imagine, Jesus never heard the word Jesus. He would be really surprised, you know, change your name. All right, well, people are changing their name, so he probably would have rolled with it. He knows who he is. But yeah, it was hundreds of years later when the Greek influence came that he became known as Jesus. Yeshua was his name. But if, you know, most people, if you talk about Yeshua, people don't know who you're talking about. Maybe some people wouldn't turn off when they hear the word Jesus. You just say, oh yeah, I'm interested in Yeshua. Whoa, who is that? You know, much was lost as folks translated Aramaic metaphors into Greek. Just a terrific amount was lost. For instance, Yeshua never called God his father. He called God Abba, which meant daddy. God the daddy. It has a very different ring and feel to it than God the Father for me. I don't know about you. God the daddy. And again, we're talking about translation here, and how translation, you lose something when you put into Greek and then into Latin and then into Elizabethan English, if you're reading the King James Version. So go back to the original. He just said God was daddy. It's a whole different feel to it. It speaks of a deep intimacy in their relationship, much more than anything having to do with gender. Just try to really even consider that what Jesus was talking about here. He was talking about the sense of, when he said, I and the Father are one, he never said Father, he said, Daddy and I are one. He's talking about, then, you know, if you call, I never called my father Daddy, not once. Not once. And that's a very different ring to it. And it speaks, we're not talking about God as being male or female, definitely. He's just talking about, he's using a term that says there's an intimacy between me and the Holy One. Say, Daddy. Could have called it mommy, but I think that would have been too much for the guys he was dealing with. These fishermen and the tax collectors were having a hard enough time trying to grasp what this guy's saying. If he had said, I and mommy are one, you know, I think they would have, you know, they would have all cut out. It was a metaphor too far, you see. So it had a different ring to it. Think of it as daddy. Yeah. Had more to do with intimacy than gender. You know, the next stanza said, I pray that one day my staunchly conservative sisters and brothers, and I do have some people I love dearly, but they are really conservative Catholics. I pray that one day my staunchly conservative sisters and brothers will discover the wisdom of the Cappadocian fathers who 17 centuries ago were proclaiming their understanding that the mystery of God is, and always will be transgender. When you get into these are the guys in Cappadocia, part of Turkey, that that about 9 centuries later, Rumi would be in. And they said, no, they came up with the Trinity, 3 persons. God was 3 persons. And again, person is important because a person isn't fully formed. Individual is only halfway there. Tribal person is just, on the beginning rungs. Tribal consciousness, individual conscious, yes, but then a person is somebody who's integrated all that's below. And so a person is what, we're calling in the Christian tradition a saint, somebody who's fully integrated. So we have these 3 fully integrated persons. God, they were saying God's not a he or a she, let alone a dove or a concept. God was this relationship of these 3 persons. Interesting. I remember the nuns telling me when they taught about St. Patrick and the Trinity, and they said, well, it's a mystery. It's there's no sense thinking about it. You'll never get to it with the mind. And that is sort of true. But I think it's more important than that, because and now maybe in a quantum era, and actually in what we're going through now, where gender is really becoming much more fluid, we're calling gender fluidity. Well, hell, the Cappadocian fathers, they were gender fluid 17 centuries ago. They were saying, hey, this is too fluid to nail down. Yeah, it became, through the mill, it became God the Father, God the Son, and the bird. It's a little hard to relate to that, make any sense out of that. But he was talking about something else. God, for those guys, they were saying God is a circle dance of love, compassion, and wisdom. I'm going to try to show you how that works. It was a circle dance. Even though with a Trinity and a 3, which is the most stable geometric figure, by the way, is the triangle. And so we get this triangle of these 3 beings and these 3 persons. And but it's a kind of circle dance. Love, compassion, and wisdom, a cosmic dance. It's one of the persons is transcendent, one of the person is human and immanent, one of the person is just stands for intimacy itself. It's very interesting to try to get your head around it. And these are words that we're just throwing at it, but it's basically saying this is a very fluid thing. It's interesting, and then and it's mysterious, and the mind can't quite handle it. So that's what the heart does. The heart is capable of resonating with mystery. And then the last couple of lines of the poem are, perhaps God's preferred pronoun was, is, and always will be we. Perhaps God's preferred pronoun was, is, and always will be we. For when God gathers in the square dance of community, there we are. Yeah. So circle dance and a square dance. It's interesting. The 3 persons, it's a kind of circle dance. The word in Greek for that, the Greeks were trying to deal with it. It was called perichoresis. It meant it's a circle dance of energy. But this isn't just energy. And that's, I think, the interesting thing about, we're talking about 3 persons in one God. It seems like, well, why would you split up? It took them a long time to actually come up with the concept of one God in the Middle East. The 3 Abrahamic religions of one God. But at the same time that that the way the Jesus followers were accepted into the empire, and the empire tried to grind it into something imperial, God at the top, the Caesar and all that stuff. These monks in the desert in Turkey were saying, no, that doesn't work for me. It's much more fluid than that. It became, sort of frozen in God the Father, God the Son, and the Holy Ghost. But it's much more interesting than that. But they had an idea. Perhaps God's preferred pronoun was we. And I'm going to show you. We'll segue to a screensaver here if we can. If I can find it. Hold on for a minute. Oh yeah. See if we can bring this one up. This will help us make a little bit of a leap, make it a little bit more visual. Put it on full screen for a minute. What we got on the left was is the great Rublev icon, which has become so famous of the Trinity, and it's just on a little out of the way church in this far out place in Russia, but it became so famous. Now to look at the Trinity, at least again in paint on a wall, it was a fresco really, and the interesting thing about that, you have the three and the tilt of the head. It really goes around in a circle. There's a lot about the symbolism that made sense to you know, middle age and the Russians in the Middle Age. But I just want to just look at some different aspects of this. And I've got next to it, the picture next to it is our picture of how the universe works. You know, we got a proton, a neutron, an electron, and we don't see the nucleus there, but in the other pictures, you'll see there's a center point that these three things are moving around, and this is at a subatomic level. This is what we discovered, what we call quantum level. But we say, yeah, this is how the universe is. Well, when you look at this, you got the same image, but with a very interesting thing. They're around a square table there. You see, they're on two corners in the middle. Traditionally, God the Father is the one on the left, and all the colors are all symbolic to the people. Jesus is in the middle. The Holy Spirit's on the right. They don't look like much like men to me, but and I don't think they're meant to. Uh, and then there's a little food in the center of the table. But look at, if you can look closely, in between, if you go down, what there's like a kind of tablecloth there, and then there's a square. There's a kind of rectangle there. Now, there's a space there between the Holy Spirit and God the Father, and at that time, they believed the universe was a square. And so that's partly one of the meanings is, but another idea is that that's the place for you or for me. That this is, first of all, looking at the divine as a kind of community of relationship. And then there's a space that you can come in and join this. I really like that. I like that view, because there's space for you. And so that fourth place. So how do you go from a triangle to a square? Well, if you look at a mandala, which is a perfect square, it's one triangle, and then you put another triangle below it, and then you get to the mandala thing of the four, which is the fullness. And so maybe there's a sense that these three persons that are constantly in motion, you know, what creates the planet, what creates the solar system, what creates the universe, that there's this constant motion going on. But you're invited. You're invited. Say, you're invited to this. Well, what would that be like? We were invited into this kind of relationship, and that, you know, one of the ancient mysteries is how you could square the circle. Well, when you join the dance, now we have a square dance. Square dance is my image of a community. If you know square dancing, and most folk dancing is, it's a kind of circle, but then there's a kind of exchange. You know, you dance with different people and whatever. It's very interesting. And so I've been spending the month just sort of meditating on this. And there's another let me take this up. But Rublev's icon, and then set against the what we know as the elemental structure. I think that's sort of interesting. But I'm going to put another one up here for you for a minute, if I can find it. Yeah. Okay. A couple people trying to get in here. I'm going to admit them. I popped out for a minute. Yeah, this is the one way to look at it here. Ron's trying to see it from the corner here of what I call the dance of God. We got the three up towards the top, and you notice we've got the mind and we got the body and the heart. We all have that. This is essential, and this is how I see these three persons configured: mind, body, and heart. Well, hell, we all have all that. That's how we can join this thing. And the mind represents wisdom, and the body is compassion. Heart is love. I tried to color code these so you could see the relationships of the various things that are dancing: the mind, the heart, and the body. Wisdom, compassion. The Buddhists call wisdom and compassion the ultimate reality. That's the Buddha nature, wisdom and compassion. Jesus called it love. Uh, and I think love could be the integration of wisdom and compassion, the integration of contemplation and action. And really those are not genders. I have those kind of little diagrams below that represent, on the left, it represents female. You have that circle with the little handle below it. A lot of times they talk about a woman looking at herself in the mirror. Well, that's certainly a male and understanding. And then the other one with the little arrow coming out for males. And interesting, those two things. And Jung said they were just energies within us all, that we had this. He used the Greek word anima, which is this a feminine energy in all of us that interestingly is connected with wisdom in most traditions. Sophia in Christianity. It's a Sharina kind of word in the Jewish thing. And for Tibetans, wisdom is emptiness. It's space, say. It's space. And that's considered feminine by the Tibetans. And then you go over to the other side, the right side, compassion is considered masculine. So this is also a confusion of what our modern, ideas are about wisdom and compassion. We think, you got to be a man to lead a country, kind of thing. That's breaking down now. And so compassion being male, which means action, because first of all, I have to be open enough to see the suffering, and then there's part of you will take action. And that's always to help relieve suffering, and that's the compassion part. Now, what the heart does is integrate both of these. Maybe you're born with a female body, but you have a higher component of the action in you. Maybe you're born with a male body, male genitalia, but you're born with more of the anima energy in you. Well, you have the other. We all have both, and the point is to bring out both. And so what's going on now are there's about 1.5 million trans people in this culture who were born with a predominance more of energy of, if they're women, they had more of that masculine energy. And if they were men, they had more of that feminine energy. And, little boys who just, were trying to, they like playing with dolls. And maybe girls like, making those stick guns and whatever. And, and then the culture said, oh, no, girls don't do that. Boys don't do that. Well, that's breaking down. It always has broken down, but now it's sort of out in the open where and maybe we could finally come to this idea of we could actually not identify as a man or a woman, but as a heart, as a human being, as a human person, and realize evolution is about integrating fully the anima and the animals. That could be really the whole deal, but the mind can't do it, and certainly the tribal rules can't do it. That's what we're saying now. No, it's just, it's unbelievably harmful to people who, to trans people, to gay people, to anybody who doesn't fit into the Adam and Eve norm, and it wasn't, Genesis wasn't meant to do that, but there it was, handy tool. Yeah, so when you look at this, you're invited to that dance. It's a dance of transformation. Yeah. So that's, I will leave that screensaver up during the break in case you want to look at it some more, but see if I can. I'm reading the Gospel of Thomas now, which is really sort of like the Gospel of Yeshua. He uses the word, and I want to read you just a short excerpt, which might be it's got 114 kind of Zen-like teachings of this wisdom teacher. And I think when Jesus called himself Ihidaya in Aramaic, which got through the translating mill, got called the single one. And then, of course, you get this whole idea that he was a single man. He didn't have any women involved in his life. Certainly, there were no women apostles. And he was single, so priests had to be single. There was a lot of confusion about what he meant by Ihidaya. This is what he meant by Ihidaya. This is Logion 2022. I'm reading through them again and just recently read this one again. Yeshua, well, this goes like this. Yeshua noticed infants nursing and said to his students, these little ones are taking milk are like those on the way into the kingdom. So they asked him, if we too are little ones, are we on the way into the kingdom? Yeshua replied, when you're able to make two become one, the inside like the outside, and the outside like the inside, the higher like the lower, so that a man is no longer male and a woman female, but male and female become a single whole. When you're able to fashion an eye to replace an eye, form a hand in place of a hand, or a foot for a foot, making one image supersede another, then you will enter in. Amazing. I can't imagine what these fishermen were trying to figure this one out. Again, I said, when you're able to make two become one, the inside like the outside like the inside, the higher like the lower, so that a man is no longer male and a woman female, but male and female become a single whole. Yeah, he's talking about, that's what he meant by a single one. It didn't mean a single man or a single woman. It meant you had integrated. And this was, 2,000 years before Jung was starting to talk about it. But he caught on to this. It's amazing that it's there in the teaching. But that's a kind of teaching that I never heard in Catholic school. Let's put it that way. None of us heard it. But that it's there. And it got buried. And so this is a much more fluid thing, you see. Much more fluid thing. So that gives us something to chew on here. And again, I'll put up this screensaver for the intermission time there, if you want to look at it a bit more. But well, hopefully we can. That's enough for now, because it's sort of I wanted just to shake up our views and see that this whole thing that's going on all around us, the fluidity, gender fluidity, the backlash against gender, the whole idea that God is a man. My problem was, uh, to see God as the Father for me was a stopper. Because all I had to work with as a little kid was my father, and I loved him at a level, but I was more scared of him than that. And so when he sort of came around, I sort of went to my room or went outside. It was that kind of thing. And some of you know what I'm talking about. And so to break that down, without breaking down the idea of this big reality that we can dance with, that's the big picture, that you're invited to the dance. Again, Hafez says you're invited to join the friend. And so if you can look at the Trinity as a circle of friends, which I certainly do, you've been invited to meet the friend. No one can resist the divine invitation. Therefore, that narrows down your choices to just two. You can come to God dressed for dancing, or be carried on a stretcher to God's word. Again, Hafez, it really does boil down to it. And most of us are carried on a stretcher, suffering in life. Our life doesn't work out. We're trying to live out of this orbit of this terrific energy, the energy of the whole universe. So some things to ponder. So in the break, keep writing if you're writing, or take some time if you've just been listening to just put down your initial resonance with one part of this teaching. Okay. And then we'll come back and sit with it together.